Did you know the video game industry is bigger than both the movie and music industries combined? In 2022 alone, the video game industry generated nearly $185 billion in revenue. But as the games have gotten bigger and more lucrative, it seems like the companies making them have become more focused on maximizing profits rather than ensuring player enjoyment and stability of the games they're selling. From microtransactions and loot boxes to rushed releases and questionable business practices, the big players in the industry have earned a reputation for prioritizing profits over the satisfaction of their players. But this problem isn't as new as we may like to think. It's been a systemic issue that has plagued this industry for decades. So in this video, we'll explore why certain video game companies are hated, why this problem isn't just a recent development, and where this industry is headed if these business practices continue. First up, let's talk about Electronic Arts. EA is one of the biggest video game companies in the world, and they've been around for decades. Commonly known for games like FIFA, Madden, Star Wars, The Sims, Apex Legends, and many more. However, they've also gained a reputation for being very greedy and prioritizing profits over player enjoyment. To some, it's more than just player enjoyment. It's more along the lines of profit over the quality of the games they're releasing and monetizing. One of the main reasons for this is their use of microtransactions. Microtransactions are in-game purchases that players can make to unlock additional content or progress more quickly throughout the game. While microtransactions have become a common feature in many games, EA has been criticized for implementing them in a way that feels predatory or unfair. For example, some players have accused EA of intentionally making certain aspects of their games more difficult in order to incentivize microtransactions. This is what's often known as pay to win in gaming. Let's say a player's goal is to beat the game. Well, they can spend 200 hours or so and gradually progress, or they could spend a few $100s and shave this time down dramatically. Now, this is a very oversimplified example of pay to win, and in this one, it doesn't seem that bad. Sure, I don't have a ton of time, so I'll spend more money. But it's never that simple. I'm afraid these monetization models have become far more complex as video games continue to progress further. Certain player versus environment games can have pay-to-win factors, but so can player versus player games. 10 years ago, you may have just purchased a game for $50 or $60, but it wasn't common practice to have a ton of additional content in the game that was put behind a paywall. These days, each game may execute this differently, and although players don't typically mind paying for certain extra features within a game, the devil is in the details here. Some games execute this much better than others, but when game companies get it wrong, players feel like they're getting ripped off. EA has also been criticized for rushing games to market before they are fully developed. This has resulted in numerous bugs and glitches that have frustrated players and ruined the overall experience of the game. One example of this is the 2015 game Star Wars Battlefront, which was released with several major bugs and a lack of content, leading to widespread disappointment among players. Another example is the 2019 game Anthem, which was released with numerous technical issues and a severe lack of content as well. This led to a significant drop in player engagement. EA also reminded us of this common trend with Battlefield 2042, which was released in October of 2021. This game was plagued with bugs and other issues that made players feel like the game was far from being completed when it was released.
Their latest Battlefield title come out, which was, whoo boy, an absolute stinker. I mean, it just was not good. It was broken right out of the gate.
It got so bad that eventually over 200,000 players signed a petition to request a refund from the game. However, by and large, this petition was unsuccessful. Virtual currencies are another reason certain game companies are resented. Just about every game these days offers their own way of doing this. But let's take an example out of Apex Legends. Let's say you want to buy a skin, and the skin costs $18 or 1,800 Apex coins. In order to buy 1,800 Apex coins, you need to buy 2,000 Apex coins, which is equivalent to $20 US. This means that you'll have 200 coins left over after you make your purchase. You're going to be way more likely to re-up on coins when another skin is released because that $2 extra is already in EA's bank account. When every transaction you make in a video game leaves you with a balance towards the game's store, it makes it that much easier to keep spending. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying players are powerless over buying what they want or don't want in a video game, but what I am saying is these companies have strategically looked at ways to squeeze out more money from their consumers. Some of you may disagree with this take here, but to me and many others, it does feel predatory that games do this. If they made it so that you could just purchase the skin for what that skin actually costs, it would feel much more fair. Try to imagine for a second going to a grocery store and buying $26 worth of food, and they say you can only pay pay with $30. That $4 extra is going to the grocery store, so you'll have a balance next time you want to return. Well, that would feel wrong, right? This is what video game companies have learned to do over the course of the last decade. Now, EA isn't the only video game publisher out there making questionable business decisions. Let's take a look at some of the reasons why Activision Blizzard has come under fire in recent years, as they've also faced their fair share of criticism from players and fans. One example of a game that was rushed to market by Activision is Modern Warfare 2. Now, I'm not talking about the one that was just released back in November, I'm referring to the original one back in 2009. This was developed by Infinity Ward, and the developers at the time were reportedly required to work long hours. This is what's often known as crunch. They were instructed to do so because Activision really wanted it to be released before Christmas of 2009. The main developers in charge were only willing to crunch if they could reap some of the rewards from the game being so successful. They wanted a small percentage of sales from the game for working so hard. Sounds fair, right? Well, despite CEO Bobby Kotick agreeing to this term, and despite the game's eventual commercial success, things didn't go as planned. Tensions between Infinity Ward and Activision arose shortly after the game's release, resulting in a lawsuit being filed by Infinity Ward's co-founders Jason West and Vince Zampella against Activision for breach of contract and unpaid bonuses. The lawsuit resulted in a settlement, and West and Zampella eventually left Infinity Ward to form their own development studio, Respawn Entertainment, which, interestingly enough, Respawn was later purchased by EA in 2017. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick has come under fire for his controversial comments about the company's approach to game development. For instance, in a 2009 earnings call, Kotick famously stated, "With respect to the franchises that don't have the potential to be exploited every year across every platform with clear sequel potential that can meet our objectives of over time becoming $100 million plus franchises, well, that's a strategy that has worked very well for us." This statement has been interpreted by some as an admission that the company is more interested in exploiting its game IPs for profit rather than creating quality products for players. I mean, using the word exploit when referring to their own customers doesn't sound very caring. Activision Blizzard has been widely criticized for their treatment of their employees over the years too. In 2019, the company laid off hundreds of employees, citing a need to streamline their business. However, many criticized the company for the timing of the layoffs, as they came just days after the company reported record profits in their earnings call. This led some to question the company's priorities, as it appeared that they were more concerned with maximizing profits than with the well-being of their employees. This was all later amplified in 2021 when many news outlets started reporting on a culture of sexual harassment from superiors at Activision Blizzard, and CEO Bobby Kotick knowing about this for years. Not only does it appear that he did nothing about this, he's also been accused of trying to cover up certain allegations against other high-level executives at the company. I want to be due diligent here and say this story that broke in 2021 goes much deeper than I covered here in this video. So if you want to learn more about it, I'll link some of the stories in the description from the Wall Street Journal and Business Insider. In 2022, Microsoft set out to purchase Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion and is currently awaiting regulatory approval from the FTC. It's unclear at this time if the deal will go through, but if it does, it's widely assumed Bobby Kotick will leave as head of Activision, but not without walking away with hundreds of millions in stock compensation. It's no coincidence that some of the most hated video game companies are also public companies. The dynamic of being a public company with the need to continually report financial performance to shareholders will certainly influence how a company operates. In the case of the video game industry, well, they aren't that unique, and the fact that the sole purpose of being a public company means they're trying to increase shareholder value however they can. This will lead to a focus on maximizing profits and cutting costs, and this will often affect prioritizing the enjoyment from the games themselves. It's also worth noting that not all public video game companies are hated, and there are many that are well respected by their players. And even the ones I listed in this video are still very successful companies. But it's worth considering the impact that being a public company can have on a company's business practices. It's important for players to be aware of the issues that exist within this industry and to hold companies accountable for their actions, whether they are public or private. One example of a successful video game company that is not publicly traded is Epic Games, the studio behind the popular game Fortnite. Epic Games has gained a reputation for prioritizing player enjoyment and supporting the development of its games, rather than solely focusing on maximizing profits. While Epic Games is certainly not perfect, their approach to game development is viewed positively by many players and industry professionals. But if you want to learn about how one guy is creating a whole new way of doing business, well, check out this video about Mr. Beast next. Thanks for watching. Peace.